What happens when Hollywood's most unpredictable star faces off against television's most calculating interviewer? You won't believe what unfolds when Mark Wahlberg sits down with George Stephanopoulos in what started as a promotional appearance but quickly spiraled into television's most explosive confrontation of the year. The tension was palpable from the moment cameras rolled, and by the time it was over, one of them would storm off set, leaving viewers stunned and social media in absolute chaos. The studio lights dimmed as the familiar opening credits rolled for another episode of Stephanopoulos' primetime talk show. The audience settled into their seats, expecting the usual promotional banter about Wahlberg's latest action thriller. Instead, they were about to witness a verbal battlefield that would leave both men's reputations hanging in the balance. Welcome back to the show. Stephanopoulos began with his trademark smile, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. Tonight, we're joined by Mark Wahlberg, star of the new film Boston Strong, which hits theaters this weekend. The camera panned to Wahlberg, who sat rigidly in his chair, his jaw already set in that familiar Boston stance that suggested he wasn't in the mood for games. "Thanks for having me, George," Wahlberg replied, his tone notably flat. The experienced actor's usual promotional energy was nowhere to be found, replaced by something that felt more like barely contained irritation. Stephanopoulos leaned forward slightly, his eyes glinting with the predatory instinct that had made him both feared and respected in political journalism. "Mark, before we talk about the film, I think our viewers would be interested in addressing some recent comments you made about your past. Specifically, your assertion that if you had been on one of the planes during 9/11, things would have gone differently." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Wahlberg's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrests of his chair. "That was taken completely out of context, George. You know that." "Was it, though?" Stephanopoulos pressed, his voice maintaining that deceptively calm tone he'd perfected during his White House years. "Because the quote I have here is pretty explicit. You said, and I quote, 'If I was on that plane with my kids, it wouldn't have went down like it did. There would have been a lot of blood in that first-class cabin and then me saying, okay, we're going to land somewhere safely, don't worry.'" Wahlberg shifted uncomfortably, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced as his frustration mounted. "Look, that was a hypothetical situation I was asked about in an interview years ago. I was talking about protecting my family, not making light of a national tragedy." "But don't you think it's rather presumptuous?" Stephanopoulos continued, his tone growing sharper, "to suggest that you would have been more effective than the actual heroes on Flight 93 who gave their lives trying to stop the terrorists." The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Members of the studio audience exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing that this wasn't going according to the usual script. The camera operators instinctively adjusted their angles, recognizing that they were capturing something far more volatile than a standard celebrity interview. Wahlberg's face flushed red, a vein beginning to pulse visibly at his temple. "Are you seriously going to sit there and twist my words like that? Those people were heroes, and I never said otherwise. What I said was taken out of context by people looking to create controversy, and apparently you're one of them. I'm simply asking about your own words, Mark." Stephanopoulos replied with manufactured innocence, shuffling through his note cards with theatrical precision. Words that many people found offensive, particularly the families of the victims. "You want to talk about offensive?" Wahlberg's voice rose dangerously. "What's offensive is you bringing up a tragedy like that to try to make me look bad on your show. What's offensive is you pretending this is journalism when it's really just tabloid garbage dressed up in a nice suit." The studio fell silent, except for the hum of the cameras. Stephanopoulos' smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind his eyes. "I think our viewers deserve to know where you stand on these issues, especially given your influence as a public figure." "My influence?" Wahlberg laughed bitterly. "Coming from a guy who spent years spinning lies for politicians before he became a TV host? That's rich, George. Real rich." The personal attack landed like a slap across Stephanopoulos' face. His composed facade cracked for just a moment, revealing something much uglier underneath. "I think we should focus on your film," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Oh, Now you want to talk about the film, Wahlberg shot back. After you ambush me with this 9/11 garbage, you think I'm just going to sit here and smile for the cameras after you tried to make me look like some kind of monster? Stephanopoulos recovered his composure with practiced ease, but the damage was done. The mask had slipped, and both men knew it. I'm simply doing my job as a journalist, Mark. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, and it hit Wahlberg like gasoline on a fire. Journalist? Is that what you call this hit job? You're nothing but a corporate puppet, reading from a script designed to tear people down for ratings. I think you're being a bit dramatic, Stephanopoulos replied, but his hands were trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. These are legitimate questions based on your public statements. Legitimate? Wahlberg's voice cracked with incredulity. You dug up a quote from over a decade ago, stripped it of all context, and used it to ambush me on live television. There's nothing legitimate about that. That's the kind of gutless journalism that's destroying this country. The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the raw hostility crackling between the two men. Camera operators zoomed in instinctively, capturing every micro-expression, every moment of this unscripted drama unfolding in real time. Stephanopoulos' mask was beginning to slip more noticeably now, his political training warring with his natural instincts. I think you need to calm down, Mark. This is live television. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, Wahlberg snarled, leaning forward in his chair. You started this, George. You wanted to play games? Let's play games. Let's talk about your own past, your own questionable decisions. Let's see how you like being on the other side of this. The threat was clear, and Stephanopoulos' composure finally began to crack in earnest. His smile became forced, mechanical, as he realized he might have pushed too far, too fast. But it was already too late to back down, and both men knew that only one of them would walk away from this confrontation with their dignity intact. The studio light seemed to burn brighter as the tension reached a breaking point, and everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Wahlberg leaned back in his chair, a dangerous smile spreading across his face. You know what, George? Since you want to dig up old dirt, let's talk about your time in the Clinton administration. Let's talk about how you helped cover up scandals and spin lies to the American people. Should we discuss that? Stephanopoulos' face went pale, his carefully constructed television persona crumbling as genuine panic flickered in his eyes. That's completely irrelevant to this interview, Mark. We're here to discuss your film. Oh, it's irrelevant now? Wahlberg's voice dripped with mock surprise. Funny how my decade-old comments were fair game, but your actual documented history of deception is off limits. What's the matter, George? Don't like being on the receiving end of tough journalism? The host scrambled to regain control, his media training kicking in as he attempted to steer the conversation back to safer territory. Let's focus on Boston Strong. Your character faces incredible odds in this film. How did you prepare for such an emotionally demanding role? But Wahlberg wasn't having it. The actor had clearly reached his breaking point, and there was no going back now. You really think you can just change the subject after what you pulled? After you tried to destroy my reputation on live television, you're even more delusional than I thought. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to promote your work, Stephanopoulos replied, through gritted teeth, his composure hanging by a thread. Isn't that why you're here? I'm here because my publicist told me you were a professional, Wahlberg shot back. But what I'm seeing is a washed-up political hack who gets his kicks from ambushing guests with gotcha questions. This isn't journalism, George. This is character assassination disguised as entertainment. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some pulling out their phones to record this unprecedented meltdown. The show's producers frantically gestured from behind the cameras, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue to unfold. Stephanopoulos' mask finally slipped completely, revealing the ruthless political operative beneath the polished television veneer. You want to talk about character? Let's discuss your criminal record. Let's talk about the hate crimes you committed as a teenager. Should we dig into that, Mark? The words hit like a physical blow, and for a moment, Wahlberg went completely still. When he spoke again, his voice was low and deadly. "You son of a bitch! You actually went there!" "It's public record," Stephanopoulos continued, sensing blood in the water despite the obvious danger. "Our viewers have a right to know about the man they're supporting at the box office." "Public record that I've addressed countless times," Wahlberg snarled, his hands clenched into fists. "Mistakes I made as a kid that I've spent my entire adult life trying to make amends for." "But you don't care about redemption or growth, do you? You just want to tear people down because it makes you feel powerful." The studio atmosphere had become electric with tension. Crew members exchanged worried glances as both men seemed on the verge of something that would go far beyond a verbal confrontation. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of this career-defining disaster. "I'm asking legitimate questions about your fitness as a role model," Stephanopoulos pressed, his voice rising as he sensed his own reputation hanging in the balance. "If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye." "Scrutiny?" Wahlberg's laugh was harsh and bitter. "This isn't scrutiny. It's a public execution. You invited me here under false pretenses, then tried to destroy me on live television. And for what? Ratings? Your own sick entertainment?" "I'm doing my job," Stephanopoulos insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "The public deserves to know who their celebrities really are. Your job is supposed to be informing people, not destroying them," Wahlberg fired back. "But I guess when you've spent your whole career spinning lies for politicians, the truth becomes pretty flexible, doesn't it?" The personal attack struck home, and Stephanopoulos's professional facade finally cracked completely. "At least I didn't spend my youth terrorizing innocent people because of their race," he snapped, immediately realizing he'd gone too far. The studio fell into shocked silence. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should continue filming this spectacular implosion. Wahlberg's face went through a series of emotions: rage, hurt, and finally cold determination. "There it is," he said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous calm. "The real George Stephanopoulos. Not the polished TV host, not the respected journalist, but the vicious little man who gets off on hurting people. You want to destroy me? Fine, but I'm not going to sit here and let you do it." Stephanopoulos realized his mistake too late. His media training had deserted him completely, replaced by pure malice and the desperate need to win at any cost. "I'm simply stating facts, Mark. If you can't handle the truth about your past, that's your problem." "The truth?" Wahlberg stood up slowly, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the visibly shrinking host. "The truth is that you're a parasite who feeds on other people's pain. The truth is that you've built your entire career on destroying others while hiding behind the pretense of journalism." The host remained seated, but his hands were visibly shaking now, as he realized he'd pushed one of Hollywood's most volatile personalities past the point of no return. "Sit down, Mark. Let's discuss this like adults." "Adults?" Wahlberg's voice rose to a roar. "Adults don't ambush people on live television with decades-old mistakes they've already addressed and made amends for. Adults don't use their platform to destroy people for entertainment. You want to act like a child? Fine, but I'm done playing your games." Stephanopoulos made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "If you walk out now, you're only proving that you can't handle legitimate criticism. Is that really the message you want to send?" But Wahlberg was already moving, his decision made. The final confrontation was about to reach its explosive conclusion, and everyone in the studio knew they were witnessing television history in the making. Wahlberg turned back toward Stephanopoulos one final time, his eyes blazing with a fury that made the entire studio hold its collective breath. "You know what the difference is between you and me, George? When I screwed up as a kid, I owned it. I faced the consequences, I made amends, and I spent decades trying to be better. But you've been hiding behind that desk, destroying people's lives, and calling it journalism." Stephanopoulos shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his earlier bravado evaporating as he realized the full weight of what he'd unleashed. "Mark, I think you're overreacting. This is just television." "Just television?" Wahlberg's voice cracked with incredulous rage. You just tried to destroy my reputation on national television, brought up the worst mistakes of my life to millions of viewers, and you call it just television? You're even more pathetic than I thought. The host made a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation, his media training finally kicking back in. Look, we can edit this out. We can start over. Let's talk about the film. But Wahlberg's laugh was cold and humorless. Edit it out? Oh no, George. You wanted to play this game in front of everyone. You wanted the drama, the ratings, the spectacle. Well, congratulations, you got it. But now you get to live with the consequences. The actor began removing his microphone with deliberate precision, each movement calculated to maximize the psychological impact on his tormentor. You see, the thing about bullies like you is that you're only tough when you think you have all the power. But the moment someone stands up to you, you crumble like the coward you really are. Stephanopoulos' face had gone ashen as he watched his career potentially imploding in real time. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of his humiliation for posterity. Mark, please, let's be reasonable about this. Reasonable? Wahlberg's voice rose again, echoing through the stunned studio. You want reasonable? Here's reasonable. I came here tonight to promote a film about Boston resilience, about people who don't back down when times get tough. Instead, I found myself face to face with everything that's wrong with modern media. The microphone came free with a sharp pop that seemed to reverberate through the silence. Wahlberg held it for a moment, staring at it like it was contaminated. You know what this represents, George? This little piece of technology that's supposed to amplify voices and share stories? In your hands, it becomes a weapon, a tool for destruction instead of communication. With that, he dropped the microphone onto the coffee table between them with a loud thud that made Stephanopoulos flinch visibly. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the studio. This was a man, literally and figuratively, dropping the mic on one of television's most powerful hosts. I've met a lot of real journalists in my time, Wahlberg continued, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who had completely seized control of the moment. People who ask tough questions because they genuinely want to inform the public, not because they get off on watching people squirm. You're not one of them. Stephanopoulos made one final, desperate attempt to salvage something from this disaster. The audience expects a certain level of accountability from public figures, Mark. I was just doing what they wanted. Don't you dare hide behind the audience, Wahlberg snarled, pointing an accusatory finger at the cowering host. These people came here expecting entertainment, maybe some insights into a new movie. They didn't come here to watch you try to destroy someone for your own sick pleasure. He turned toward the studio audience, many of whom were still filming with their phones, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock and fascination. I apologize to all of you for what you've had to witness tonight. You deserved better than this circus, and I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of this man's personal vendetta. The genuine emotion in his voice was unmistakable, and several audience members nodded in understanding. It was clear that public opinion in the room had shifted decisively against Stephanopoulos, whose reputation was disintegrating before their eyes. Turning back to the host one final time, Wahlberg delivered his parting shot with devastating precision. You want to know the real tragedy here, George? You had a platform that could have been used to inspire people, to share important stories, to make a real difference in the world. Instead, you turned it into a gladiator arena where you get to play emperor, deciding who lives and who dies based on your own twisted whims. Stephanopoulos opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The fight had gone out of him completely, leaving behind only a broken shell of the arrogant man who had started this confrontation. His hands trembled as he reached for his water glass, only to find it empty. I've spent 20 years in this business dealing with all kinds of people, Wahlberg continued, his voice now carrying the weight of finality. Agents, directors, producers, reporters, some good, some bad, but most just trying to do their jobs. But you're something else entirely. You're what happens when power corrupts completely, when someone forgets that there are real human beings on the other side of their questions. The studio fell into complete silence as Wahlberg began walking toward the exit, his footsteps echoing dramatically in the hushed space. Behind him, Stephanopoulos sat frozen in his chair, unable to speak or move as his world collapsed around him. But Wahlberg wasn't finished. He paused at the edge of the set, turning back one final time with a look of pure contempt. You know what the saddest part is? Somewhere along the way, you probably convinced yourself that this is what journalism looks like, that destroying people makes you some kind of truth teller. But all you've really done is prove that you're exactly the kind of person who shouldn't be trusted with a platform like this. With that devastating final blow, Mark Wahlberg walked off the set and out of the studio, leaving behind a stunned audience, a traumatized crew, and one thoroughly humiliated host who would spend the rest of his career trying to recover from this spectacular public destruction. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Stephanopoulos sitting alone at his desk, his face a mask of defeat and bewilderment. The man who had started the evening as a powerful media figure had been reduced to a broken shell by his own arrogance and cruelty. As the studio lights finally dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, everyone present knew they had witnessed something unprecedented, the complete and total destruction of a television host's career, brought about by his own hubris and a guest who refused to be intimidated. The show that was supposed to be about promoting a movie had instead become a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked media power and the consequences of treating human beings as disposable entertainment. Mark Wahlberg had walked into that studio as just another celebrity guest, but he walked out as the man who had finally held George Stephanopoulos accountable for his actions. In the end, the real drama wasn't scripted or manufactured. It was the raw, unfiltered clash between a man trying to destroy someone for ratings and another man who simply refused to let it happen.